Yeah, I still own a Harley Davidson.
Yeah. Oh, here's the music. My live studio audience, Coach. There it is. Welcome to the Jake Brown Podcast. Have I got a great show for you today? I think we've been talking about doing this for a while. I mean, I think I said earlier today it was a year before I even had the podcast. I think I had mentioned, I want to have a podcast and I'd love to have you on and talk boxing.
Yeah.
Ted Hohney is my guest today. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming over.
I appreciate you inviting me over.
Oh yeah, no problem. I would hope that this won't be the first and last episode that we do. I would guess that I find interesting. I want them to come back because what we talk about today may not be the same thing we talk about in 6 months or a year. And as all our lives change, cool things are always happening. And I know in the world of boxing, there's always stuff. there's always stuff going on.
There's always something brewing in boxing, I'm telling you.
What is your very first? You go way back. What is your first memory of boxing, and what made you? Because I know you also fought. What was your first memory of boxing, and what got you into boxing?
Well, my first memory of boxing was we came from a large family. It was out in the country, and my oldest cousin, his name was Robert, or Bobby, we call him Bobby Walker. And he sort of broke us all in, because he was carrying the weight. And so he used to wrap our hands with towels. And we'd be out in the yard having at it with towels wrapped around our hands.
Just towels?
Just towels.
No gloves?
No gloves. Couldn't afford gloves, so we had towels wrapped around our hands. So that was my initial encounter with boxing.
Now, was there any coaching involved, or was it just hands got wrapped in towels and then the kids just start fighting?
No, well, Bobby would stand there and, he would say things like, use your jab, dummy. Use your jab. You can't be a one-hand fighter. Do this. So stuff like that.
Yeah. Did you learn anything?
Well, yeah, I did. I learned how not to get beat up a lot. I learned how to scuffle. I could do that country scuffling, but and throw a good punch. But
is that what we call nowadays dirty boxing?
Yeah.
A lot of dirty boxing back then?
Yeah.
Okay. So when did you then, I guess, start to take it serious and start to get like actual coaching, actual gloves, maybe in a ring, not a backyard? Like when did all that start?
Probably in 1967.
1967.
68.
Okay.
Like that is when I got my first exposure to actual boxing. I went in Job Corps, and they sent me to Utah.
Okay.
And Coach George was out there. And, I wandered in the gym and
there you go. Yeah, move the mic a little closer.
Just started, beating on the bag, and he walks up and he says, "Hey, you kind of strong." I said, "Well, yeah, I guess." He said, "You ever fight?" And I said, "Nah, just." And I gave him the same story I just told you. He said, "Well, we're going to do something different." And so he was the one that taught me, a good boxing stance and throw a jab and throw a right hand and, use combinations and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's how it all started.
I never would have guessed your start came in Utah. Of all places.
Of all places.
Of all places, Utah.
Back in 68, we didn't have, people of color didn't have a lot of places to go.
Yeah.
So we mainly stayed right around the Job Corps Center and in the gym.
What city were you in there?
Gosh, I don't even remember the name of the city. Well, we were close to Salt Lake.
Okay.
Because they would bus us down to Salt Lake, and I think in Salt Lake they had this little teeny black community there.
Okay.
And, the counselors would separate us, hey, you know, all you guys come here, go with me, and the rest of you, you know, you can go over there. And, you know, they would take us, you know, take us to the stores in the little black community.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, we got to meet people, sit down and eat hamburgers and laugh and talk and, you know, stuff like that.
Now, you came from Virginia, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, when I went into the Job Corps, I went to the Job Corps from New Jersey.
Okay.
Originally, I'm from Virginia.
Very different
Oh,
when you're in Utah.
Oh, very.
Very different.
Yeah.
I used to race motorcycles it's called Tueli, which is a little south of Salt Lake City, like maybe 15 minutes south. But it's just in the middle of the high desert. There's nothing there. And they put a track, some guy, it's called Miller Motorsports Park, and they put a track out there. And I used to go there a couple times a year, and I'd go race. And that's really my only exposure to Utah, is just going out there to race.
Yeah, well, I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we was at the Thiokol Chemical Corporation.
Okay.
You know, it was somewhere up on one of the, you know, up in the mountains somewhere that overlooked Salt Lake.
Okay. It is beautiful there. I will say that. I can see why. I have one of my friends from high school moved there. Actually, two of my friends from high school moved there, but one went there for skiing, and she met her husband, who was a pro skier, who moved to Salt Lake to ski, and they just never left, and they're still.
Wow.
Now they got their kids, and they're still ski bums, and yeah. I mean, the scenery was always very, very beautiful.
I could not wait to leave. It was one of the craziest times.
Yeah. So you had training, you know, you kind of got your first intro into training.
Right.
When did you decide that you actually wanted to, you know, go up a level and now compete?
Well, it was right there.
Okay.
Right there in Utah. I was there long enough for that.
So you had your first amateur fights when you were there?
Yeah, I did. I fought this kid named Frank Black. He made me think twice about boxing because, you know, I started to get a little bit too cute.
Uh-huh.
And man, he plowed into me, broke my nose.
Okay.
And so I had, you know, take time off for that, let it heal. And I thought about it and I said, nah, I can't go out like that. So I went back to the gym and, you know, started training all over again. And by then, we had some new people coming to the Job Corps Center. And this kid, he just got there, didn't spend any time with him, can't remember his name, but he walked in, he said, I want the baddest man in the gym, and I want him in the ring now. And, you know, I was just over there beating on the bag, you know, going through my movement, you know, trying to practice. And he said, hey, you look like you wanna fight? I said, nah, you know, I do what the coach says. So
That's a good answer.
Yeah, he went and got the coach, and the guy was a little bit heavier than me. I was at weighed 165. He was, you know, a little bit heavier. So, you know, the coach said, hey, come here, let's glove up and get in there. So we did. It turned out he didn't really want the baddest guy in there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was near the baddest guy in there, but, yeah, no, I shook him loose pretty good.
I think people, and I think the same holds true for like mixed martial arts or jiu-jitsu or, you know, any of the different fighting type disciplines where you hear these analogies of people saying, oh, when I see red, like I'm unstoppable. And I think people really believe that they can just show up and just brawl someone in a boxing ring and they're going to have some success. And maybe against someone who doesn't know what they're doing, but someone who has, you know, even a basic knowledge of footwork and defense and head movement, they're going to make that person look absolutely ridiculous. You know, like it really is a skill. And I think I kind of took that for granted a little bit when I started, exactly how much of a skill it is, until I was in the ring with people who were really skilled. And I was like, oh my God, this is not going well for my face right now. Like, I need to improve my skills to protect this face.
But if you notice, and we've trained together, I don't do a lot of trash talking.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the downfalls in boxing.
Yeah.
And, I learned that early on with that kid that came in, one of the baddest man in the gym, and he still, and he couldn't fight.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to talk. I don't talk trash. And when somebody wants to talk trash, I let them talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talk.
I'm not much of a talker either. Really, in any sports I've ever done, I've always been pretty quiet. I'll talk a little bit here and there, but really, if I know the guys, like growing up in high school, we knew some of the guys from the other schools, and, I was friends with some of them. I would talk to them. That I didn't really consider that like talking trash. But if I didn't know you, I was usually pretty quiet. I understand why people do it, because it's easy to get under someone's skin if they're too emotional. But I don't know. It feels like bad karma to me.
Yeah, it is. Well, you see what happens a lot of times, these guys, these pros today, they get to the weigh-in and, they're shoving, pushing, and sucking, punching, and, they do all of that, and then they get in the ring, and what happens?
Yeah,
They get themselves knocked out.
Yeah.
Or they get themselves beat, and the referee stopped the fight or something.
Yeah.
So trash talking was just never one of my...
I think that would be the most awkward part about being a pro fighter is I've seen a lot of videos where they'll put like a reporter and then the two fighters at a table 3 feet from each other, and they essentially start telling each other, oh, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this to you, and you can't. And I'm thinking, okay, like I get you're trying to sell the fight, but shouldn't the fight sell itself based on your guys' skill? And that, I feel like it's so much more of a circus surrounding the actual fight when, there's a lot of people who are like me that just don't care about any of the circus. We just want to watch the fighting. And that it seems like anymore it's as much about the circus and not necessarily as much about the actual fight itself.
What they're doing. They're putting butts in the seats.
Yeah.
They're selling those tickets.
Yep. And pay-per-views and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, they got to build that, build up to the fights. And then when they get to the fights, the one that's doing the most yapping is normally the one that's, at the post-fight press interview, they're standing there, with their head down. Well, I could have done this and I should have done that. And well, you shouldn't have talked so much trash in the beginning.
Yeah, I tend to be that kind of athlete. I'm just pretty quiet. I feel like you got enough to worry about in any sport. I don't need to add fuel to the fire. And, the climb up is hard enough, and the fall down can be very, very brutal. And when you put yourself up on a pedestal, like, it's one thing to be confident. It's another thing to really boost yourself up, and you're just ripe for a crash landing at that point.
Well, I've laid on the canvas, out one time and got rocked and sit on my behind a time. So, that's one of the reasons why, I was thinking, man, suppose I had run in my mouth prior to that fight.
Yeah.
Boy, don't I look stupid.
It's very humbling when you get knocked on your ass. It's you've seen, I've been on my butt on more than one occasion, probably on more than 10 occasions. I mean, let's be honest. It's very humbling, and you go in with a game plan that you think is going to be successful, and then none of it works, and pretty soon you can't breathe because you took a liver shot, and you're like, where in the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
And it makes you reevaluate things very quickly.
Yeah, well, normally what I like to tell a fighter just before he leaves the corner is, hey, you've got, if he's an open fighter, you've got 3-minute rounds. That means you don't have any time to waste. So you have 30 seconds in the first round to figure this guy out as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's game on.
Yeah.
I don't have a game plan. I don't tell them, yeah, well, we're gonna get in there, you know, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do that, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do that. You know, my style of coaching is in that first 30 seconds. You know, I'm playing the chess game against the other corner. You know, and I'm looking. He's got his elbows up. You know, cracking. You know, use your jab. You know, not one jab. You know, throw 2, 3 jabs in a row. You know, slide right, pop him. You know, slide left. You know, I'm doing it as I go along. Best laid plans.
Yeah.
Best laid plans. I think it's better to have a game plan for training. You know, if you know the guy, somebody like, we'll pick a name. One of my favorite fighters, you know, Boots, Jerron Ennis.
Okay.
If I had somebody getting ready to fight him, you know, one of the things that I would tell him, because he's a hard fighter, you know, he's deadly on the outside, and if you try to take him on the inside, oh, he is deadly. So, you know, if I know my guy is good on the outside, you know, and not so good on the inside, I'll tell him, get quick shots off and keep moving. You got to keep turning him. You know, when you make him step, try to throw a shot. Because if you give him a chance to breathe, you're gone.
Yeah.
So.
You coached in the Marine Corps, correct?
I did. I coached I guess you would call it the alternate all-Marine team. I had a team down at Henderson Hall. There was only 2 boxing teams in the Marine Corps. The one at Camp Lejeune and mine down at Henderson Hall.
Okay.
And when they suspended the all-Marine boxing team, then mine was the only one left.
So you were the main team then.
So we got the glory.
You got the. Well, what did you box when you were in the Marines as well, or did you just kind of go from amateur, enlisted, and then you just decided you wanted to coach?
You know, I had my last competitive fight in 1972. So now I'm telling you that I'm an old guy. In 1972, when we left Vietnam and came back, you know, and I got to Okinawa, and Coach Bain was there. He just goaded me. Come on, we got to fight. I haven't trained in over 6 months, and you want me to fight? Yeah, I want you to fight. So I said, well, that ain't happening. So we went to the gym. Nicholson and I went to the gym. This kid from New York, you know, he wanted to mess around in the gym. I said, nah. So we put the gloves on anyway, and we started messing around. And Coach Bain was watching from the office. I didn't know that. And, you know, I kind of hit Nicholson kind of hard, you know, and he buckled his legs. And so Coach Bain told me, he said, yeah, you're going to fight this weekend. So that was the last time that I had fought, you know, competitively.
Okay.
It was on Okinawa in 1972.
Okay.
And then, fast forward 20 years, in 92, as it would be, you know, those times wasn't picked. I saw 2 Marines training, Mark Ballard and James Harris. I saw them 2, and I said, what are you guys doing? He said, oh, we're training for the smoker over on the Army side. It's in 2 weeks. I said, well, neither one of you going to make it. He said, why? I said, because y'all going to kill yourself out here. Y'all don't know what you're doing. So Spike said, okay, then if you know, why don't you start training us? And that started it.
That was it.
That was it. You know, I started training with them. Then a couple other guys came along, and you know, after the smoker, a couple other guys came along, and we didn't have any sparring partners. So, you know, every now and then I'd, you know, get in the ring and I'd spar with them.
Yeah,
that's a lie. We didn't have a ring. We had mats on the floor.
Okay.
So, you know, we sparred over there.
So you were I guess what would be called a player coach.
Yeah.
You were the coach, but you would still get in there and work with them.
Right.
If you felt they needed that kind of work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that turned out successful, you know. That turned out successful, and then the athletic director came and said, "Hey, why don't we just start a team?" And I said, "I have a daytime job." He said, yeah. Well, let's start a team. So we started the Henderson Hall boxing team. We started out with 30 guys, wound up with 5, and those 5 in 90, yeah, it was in 92, in 93, in 93 they won the Virginia State Golden Gloves, the team trophy. 4 out of the 5 won gold, and so we just started traveling around. We went down to Camp Lejeune one night and fought against the alternate all-Marine boxing team. The guys that Roosevelt Sanders wasn't taking out. Some of them stayed back and cleaned them up. As a matter of fact, I lost 2 of my fighters to Roosevelt Sanders when he heard about it.
Oh, like they got promoted basically. Like you coached them up that good that.
Yeah, they left me and Roosevelt Sanders sucked them up. And I'm still in. One of them is a mayor in Louisiana.
Oh, really?
Yeah, James Harris. We called him Spike. And Brian Fields. He and I, we talked yesterday, and we called him the Showboat.
Okay. Did he do some trash talking in the ring? Was that?
Nah.
He's pretty quiet.
Talk trash.
Okay.
Neither one of them talk trash.
All right. Did you guys who were you mainly fighting then? Were you going to different military bases, or were you just going to whatever show you could find?
We was just going to shows.
Okay.
We was in Arlington, Virginia, but we fought down at the shore, down in Virginia Beach. We fought in North Carolina. We fought out near we fought in West Virginia, and then we fought out near. I can't remember the name of this place. Out there where Virginia Tech is.
Oh, Blacksburg.
Yes, Blacksburg. We went up to Blacksburg, and we fought. We just fought all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. Did you know that was going to be your path? Kind of once you got a taste of the coaching, did you know that was going to be? Because here you are, decades later, and you're still coaching.
Absolutely. Had no idea where it was going to take me, but it took me to. I met some of the world champs from the DMV area. Got to know them, got to work with them. I just had no idea.
Yeah. What have you noticed? So since you started coaching in, did you say 92? Mm-hmm. Until now, 2025, what have you noticed that's changed in the sport of boxing? Either that you agree with or that you do not agree with.
Well, I don't agree with the amateurs now. When you're an elite fighter, you fight without a headgear. I don't agree with that. I think that if you're an amateur, as long as you're fighting amateur, you should wear headgear. The Olympics, most of the guys go to the Olympics, whether they win or lose, they come back and they go pro anyway. So, no headgear there. The thing that I really don't like is that people get strung along. Good fighters get strung along and don't get their shot at the title because it's all a money game.
Yeah.
Why would I want to fight you? I'm the world champ. Why would I want to fight you? That may only be, $800,000.
Mm-hmm.
But if I fight that guy over there, that's $1.5 million. So,
yeah.
You get pushed aside.
The fans lose out then.
Right. Winky Wright, that happened to him. He just never could get that big fight. And it's not because he wasn't a good fighter. He was a dangerous fighter. But they just strung him along.
Yeah. Well, what have you noticed about the sport that you like, maybe in the direction that it's gone? over the last 35 years.
You know, I like how technical the fighters have gotten.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fighters are really, really technical, and you know, a guy from, you know, my age, from my time, the only way you could beat those guys is with a baseball bat or with a handgun or something like that. I mean, these guys are just so doggone technical.
Yeah.
You know? They're, you know, they're just slick fighters. You know, hitting them in the head don't happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hitting them in the body, yeah, you can crack some of them in the body, but the real good fighters, I mean, these guys are just, they're so technically sound
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, you look at them and you figure, man, they got to be played, you know, somebody's got to have a handset playing these guys, because this is just not,
Yeah.
it's just incredible how technically sound they are.
I definitely go down some rabbit holes on Instagram of different fights. I enjoy watching amateur fighting a lot more, but like the open level amateur fighting, and I don't know, like I guess my algorithm wants me to watch like Kazakhstan and Russian fighters because I've been getting bombarded with those videos.
Mm-hmm.
But just like you're saying, it is amazing how technically sound all of them are, and from a very, very young age too. You know,
Yeah.
the footwork, the head movement, the defense. Really, the defense is what is most impressive.
Oh, it is. I'm just telling you, these guys are just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, they are. You know, I remember a time when the slickest thing on 2 feet was Muhammad Ali.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the only one that ever got close to solving that problem was Joe Frazier. The only one. You know, but now
They're all
like that.
they're all like that.
Yeah, even some of the, you know, in the top 20, even some of the guys that don't make it to the top 20,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these guys are just phenomenal fighters.
Yeah, they are. It's such a logjam the higher up you get.
Yeah, it
The
is.
competition, you know, you're splitting hairs at that point
Yeah.
with how good all these guys are, and it doesn't, you know. I can't remember who, not Tank Davis's last fight, but the fight before that. And yeah, he knocked that guy out. And I think at the time his record was 18-0, which, okay, like maybe that's a lot of pro fights. Not a lot compared to a lot of pros, but 18 that's still a lot of fights, you know.
He's still on his way up.
He's still on his way up, and he fought up until he got knocked out, a hell of a fight,
Yeah,
you know?
I think you're talking about, let me see, Rolly,
I can't remember.
what was his name? Rolly Romero was one of the guys. And the other one was the one that fought, crap, I'm drawing a blank on all their names now. The kid from Texas.
This is why I keep the computer here. I'm actually...
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, so am I. I'll have to... I'm sure it'll pop up as soon as... Let's see. Frank Martin.
Yeah, Frank.
Frank Martin, that's who it was. And like Frank fought a good fight right up until he didn't.
Until he did.
Right up until he didn't. But like he fought a really good fight, you know? And like Tank is probably an all-timer at this point.
He is.
He is, and he can kind of just do what he wants in that ring because he's that good.
He's just that technically sound.
He is,
You
but
know, he can, you know, I watched him. This guy can cover up and let you beat on him, and you're not getting anything out of it
mhm.
except tired. And then when he figured, okay, you got enough, you know, watch this,
Yeah.
and he start dropping them bombs on you.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, and I mean, from someone in my position, like I try to imagine what it would be like to be an up and coming fighter, you know, as a 10-year-old who's starting out, and it's like it seems like such a high mountain nowadays to try to ascend because of what we're saying. everyone is so good. And, you're only going to have easy fights for a short amount of time. And then the people that you're going to start fighting they're all going to be on your level. And it's going to be tough rounds every time you're in that ring. And I think it's almost, I kind of compare this to motorcycle racing. Motorcycle racers, the guys who are at the top level, like in World Superbike and MotoGP, these guys have been racing since they were 6-7 years old. And it very much is a sport of attrition. The kids who can break bones and then recover and get back out there with no fear, they're the ones that start to weed themselves out from the ones who now have that fear in their head, who are a little apprehensive about maybe getting on the throttle sooner. And boxing is very much that way, where these kids who start out, the ones who can't overcome, getting punched or getting injured, or they can't overcome a loss, maybe mentally, and it ruins them, they're the ones who kind of get left behind. And the kids who, they get hurt, they bounce back, they're not gun shy, they're right back to it, they're the ones that start to rise, and that's where the number may start out, 1 million fighters, and by the time you get to the pros, well, now that number has been, reduced by quite a big number.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, anyone can fight if you want to fight. Anyone, it takes no equipment to learn to box. Just like when you started out, you put towels on your knuckles.
Yep.
Some kids don't even do that, I'm sure, in some parts of the world. They just start swinging at each other. But you can practice fundamentals, like right in the living room. I do footwork shadow boxing in my living room. You can practice. There's nothing that you really need to start boxing. But at some point, you're going to get challenged and you're going to get tested. And the ones that can kind of bounce back from, I guess, the adversity and keep pushing on, they're the ones that, I guess, stand the best chance to make it. There's no guarantees anyone's going to make it. But
the only thing that you really need for boxing is, we all call it heart. But, you just got to have that will to survive.
Yeah.
You can take, like you said, a 10-year-old kid, if he's got the will to survive, he wouldn't think twice about, if he's 10, fighting somebody, that's 13, 14, because he's got that will to survive. Mm-hmm. He gets hit and says, yeah, that hurt, but it didn't hurt that bad.
Yeah. You said when you were first starting out coaching in the Marines, your team went from 35 down to 5. Do you think a little bit of that played into it, where guys maybe are getting hit or beat up or frustrated and then they just give up?
No, because we didn't even get to the sparring phase.
Okay.
You have to go through a conditioning phase first. And that's what took them all out. They just did not have that will to survive.
They hadn't even gotten hit yet?
Hadn't even gotten hit.
Oh, man.
Didn't even, the physical part, the physical aspect, the running, the calisthenics, the weight training, the this, the that, and the other, before they even put a glove on their hand.
Mm-hmm. They're already defeated.
They were mentally broke.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was this hard, Coach. Well, if you think this is hard, you wait till you start getting socked upside of your head.
Yeah.
That's when it gets hard. You get your eyes crossed, and then you say, "Ooh, I'm not doing that anymore."
Yeah. It definitely weeds people out. And I don't ever have ill thoughts or show any ill will for people who don't want to spar but just want to do the workout. Because it's a totally different animal when you decide that, okay, I want to fight. When you get in the ring and it's just you and some other psychopath that's staring at you, that's a very unique feeling,
Absolutely.
And you're very lonely. And even though there's a bunch of people and you got your coaches there and people are, coaching you up and giving you advice and stuff, nobody can help you when you're actually in there. And I think I could definitely see how that aspect of any combat sport, jujitsu or, MMA type fighting, how that would be off-putting or really, really intimidating. And I see people who just want to do it as a workout, as like, giving them just a little bit of the drug. And eventually maybe they'll like it and they'll want to challenge themselves a little more. I'm also very much a wishful thinker. Yeah, I guess you either gotta want to fight or it's just not going to happen.
You either have to want it or you don't.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, the first guy I fought, Frank Black, broke my nose. I'm telling you, blood was all over the place. And, Coach George, I'm sure he didn't think I was coming back in the gym. Mm-hmm. But I just couldn't go out like that.
Yeah. Oh, that comes from deep down,
Yeah, I just couldn't go out like that.
Yeah.
I got my nose broke, in front of all these people, and lost the fight, and I can't go out like that.
Can't go out like that. Yeah. No, I get that. I get that for sure. I think, you've seen me spar plenty of rounds, and I don't know if you keep in touch with LA at all. He said something to me. Oh, geez. One of the many times he beat me up in the ring. But I was picking his brain after class, and he was telling me when he very first started out, he got put in the ring with someone who was much better than him, and this guy basically just beat the shit out of him.
Right.
And had continued to beat on him multiple sparring sessions. And I'll never forget, he said this to me. He says, I just reached a point where I was done getting beat up. And no matter what happened, even if I lost a round, I was going to get my shots on them, And that has always stuck with me. It's always been in the back of my mind that, and I don't know if I'm now doing that, but I just I'm just not going to get beat up, I may lose a round. I may not throw as many punches as I want because maybe I'm just getting pressed really hard, but I'm trying to take that mentality of I'm just not going to let that happen. Or if it does happen, I'm still going to make you hurt a little bit in the process.
Yeah, well, that's called you getting tired of taking those unnecessary butt whippings.
Well, yes.
You get tired. You take enough of those things.
Yeah.
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 You'll fight back. You'll fight back.
That is
trust me, you will fight back.
That is very true. That is very true. I know you're a little pressed for time. How much time you got?
I got about. Let me see. Wait. Okay, I can answer that later.
All right.
That was one of the guys that I'm going to meet.
Okay.
He's got a problem.
So before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about boxing culture. And, I was saying that from all the other sports I've been associated with, the culture of boxing is by far the most confusing and seems to be eluding me the most. Can you explain boxing culture? What is boxing? What is the culture of boxing? It is such a circus, I feel like.
There is so many faces to boxing culture. So many faces. Basically, every coach and every boxer, we're all there to do the exact same thing. We're out to test. The fighters are testing their skills. The coaches are going to test their ability to play chess without a chessboard. the fighter. Our fighter is our chess piece. So, basically,
I feel like boxing gets a bad rap.
it gets a bad rap because basically we're all a bunch of nice guys.
Yeah.
Now, every now and then, you'll find that one that's got, more mouth and he's always, trying to stir up a problem. But by and large, we're all just one big family, and we understand that. We understand that, like in the amateurs, not so much, but in the pros, gotta sell tickets for the fight. Gotta sell tickets for the fight. And you don't go beyond a certain point. But then you have some coaches and some fighters that go beyond that point. That's when it gets what I call cruddy.
Okay.
I mean, but basically the culture of boxing is a bunch of guys that, they're all friendly, but they all want to, you got to have the number one person to beat his chest.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, boxing is not a hard thing. The culture of boxing is not a hard culture to figure out.
Oh man.
We're all gonna go there. We're all gonna get our fighters prepared. They're all gonna fight. And normally you see coaches, they'll shake hands and say, "Wow, that was a good fight," but we'll meet you again down the road.
That doesn't always happen though. But I guess it's that way with any sport.
It doesn't. But once you get to the pro side, then it gets a little more what I call cruddy.
Okay.
The culture changes up there.
Well, money makes everything.
Well, money changes everything.
Money changes everything.
Changes people.
It does.
So.
Fame changes people, and now everyone wants to be, TikTok famous or, on social media famous, that kind of thing. That probably plays a little into people acting a little out of character or maybe outside of what their normal personality is. It's almost like they create a character of themselves, and that character is now promoting their fights. But turn the cameras off, that person may be completely different.
They are.
More reserved, just more humble.
Fighters are a bunch of nice guys. They have good humor about themselves. They know that a fight is just a fight. Jaime Palmer fought, Kelvin Kelly. Kelvin Kelly was trying to make a comeback. And we fought in Las Vegas, and I thought, whoa, this is gonna be outrageous. But as it turned out, when the fight was over, of course they gave the fight to Kelvin Kelly. But he just walked up to us and said, "Hey guys, thanks for coming out for the fight." He said, "But if I can't beat this kid, who can I beat? I'm retiring."
Just like that.
Just like that.
Man.
That was Kelvin Kelly's last time in the ring. And I thought it was going to be, I was on edge, I was ready to, for whatever his corner had to say.
Yeah.
Nope.
Just like that. Where do you, I think one thing I like about the UFC from a business standpoint is that it is its own entity. It is its own business. It's not like in boxing, there's the WBA, there's the WBC, the WBO. Yeah, there's all these different governing bodies, and they're all almost competing against each other for fights. Where in the UFC, Dana White says, "You two are fighting. I don't care whether you like it or not. This is what the fans want." Do you think boxing needs to go more toward a model like that, where everything is just kind of combined and now everyone's under one umbrella?
Boxing used to be like that when they only had the two belts.
Okay.
Boxing used to be like that. And it was always, if you were the champ, this is who you're going to fight. And that was it. There was no two ways about it. That's the way boxing was modeled. If I'm the champ and you wanted a shot, I had to fight you. But now, you know, the fighter can look at his, no, I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want that yet. But to get back to your point, is you have all of these different belts, you know, and they don't want to unify them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody wants to hold on to it, to their sanctions because, you know, well, I can sanction a fight against this and I can make that and I can do it over here and I can do that. You know, it's all about money now.
Yeah.
And that's what's wrong. I talked to Joe Frazier once. I was still in the Marine Corps, and this guy happened to love the Marine Corps because he's from a little place called Froggy Bottom, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Right out, you know, right near the Marine Corps base at Parris Island. And, you know, he told me, he said, you know, in my entire boxing career, I made $12 million. He said, and now these guys can make $12 million in one fight.
Yeah.
He said, they're spoiled. He said, and that's why nobody's fighting anybody, because everybody's holding out, trying to fight this one over there, that one over there. You know, that one with a belt. They don't want to give anybody else a chance.
Yeah.
They just want to fight. I'll put my belt up to your belt, and you know, this multi-million-dollar fight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and can you imagine? Joe Frazier fought the eliminations. He fought Ali. Well, he fought all the way through the eliminations. Then he fought up to Ali. Then Ali got suspended. Ali got suspended because he didn't want to go in the military. And you know, Joe Frazier's the one that got him back in the ring. Joe Frazier told his promoter, said, "Hey, put this kid back in the ring, and I'll make him quit. Bring him back, and I'll make I'll make boxing rid of him." That's what got Ali back in the ring. Because if it hadn't been for that, he would have just fell by the wayside.
Well, I guess I'm glad that happened because
Well, yeah, because I'm telling you,
we wouldn't have had what we all know to be, you know, Muhammad Ali. You know,
yeah,
it would have been.
And Joe Frazier, I'm telling
Yeah.
you, those two set the tones for heavyweights, which was something. I'm telling you, that was the quintessential floater against the flat-footed power puncher.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, they put on shows.
There's something very, very, very special about the heavyweight champion of the world. And it's not like a disrespect to light heavyweight, to welterweight, to, you know, any of the other classes. Mm-hmm. But heavyweight champion of the world is just a whole different thing to say. And those are, you know, and I'm not saying people don't want to watch like Floyd fight or Canelo fight.
Oh, no.
You know, people, I want to watch those guys fight. But I remember, you know, I was a kid when Tyson was king of the world, you know. I have a memory. So when he lost to Buster Douglas, where was he in? I think he was in China or Japan or somewhere.
Yeah.
And my friend Casey and I were listening on the radio to that fight because there was not on TV. You know, we couldn't find it anywhere. It just wasn't on. And I don't know, what year was that? Like 89 or something, or somewhere in there. And we stopped what we were doing and we were laying on the floor listening to Tyson and Buster Douglas. And we weren't even like huge boxing fans, but that's just how big Mike Tyson was at his peak. And I can only imagine what Muhammad Ali was like, you know, at his peak. You know, that was before me. So I just had Tyson to kind of compare that to. It was crazy. And it's like when he lost, the world stopped. It was like the biggest shock in all of sports.
That wasn't supposed to happen.
It was not supposed to happen.
It wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, but that's fighting.
Yeah, it is. You know what? The saying is, any given day.
Yep. Yeah.
Any given day.
Or a puncher's chance. That's all it takes. That's all it takes.
I was watching that fight and I just couldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. You know, I said, holy smokes, he's chopping Mike down.
Yeah.
He is chopping Mike, especially he got up off of the floor to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think people forget that.
He got up off of the floor and turned that fight around.
Yep. And no one had come close to doing that up until that point.
No.
And I think that was probably the first crack in the Iron Mike mystique at that point.
Yeah, that started him on the down on the bottom side of the hill.
Yeah.
But
I hope that I've always been a fan of boxing. I enjoy watching like the UFC just because they're a bunch of crazy psychos and they're interesting.
Yeah,
they're interesting people.
They're all tough guys.
Oh, they're extremely tough. But boxing, I think boxing is always going to have like a special place in my heart. And I wish I could have got started much, much sooner than 46. Obviously, that it's not ideal to start getting punched in the head. But boxing will always be one of those sports that I think on some level I will always have like a love affair with. It's one of those sports that I dream. I'm an old guy. I can still dream about being world champ. It's not going to happen. But, getting in there and even just sparring, it's so much fun. And, I always encourage anyone with kids, boys, girls, get them into some sort of combat sport.
Right.
Any of them. Boxing, jiu-jitsu, whatever. It doesn't matter. Get into something, because I think it does something to your brain, and and there's a lot of just life lessons to be learned in general from any combat sport.
Well, the thing that I just can't wrap my head around is, for years everybody talked about how violent boxing was, but boxing is a protected sport.
Mm-hmm.
But then comes the UFC, and people flock to that, to watch these two gladiators beat each other bloody, and I mean, they're just not using, 12-ounce gloves.
Oh, no.
These guys are using what I would consider as a bag glove,
Mm-hmm.
and they're using their knees, they're using their elbows. I mean,
yeah.
But I've yet to hear somebody complain and say, "Hey, man, you do that, you're not going to last long.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a brain hemorrhage, you get your skull cracked, you get kicked in the head, you could go on." That is a dangerous sport, but boxing gets the bad rap.
Mm-hmm.
They said Muhammad Ali's condition came from boxing. Well, what's that guy's name? Michael J. Fox, is that him?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
He's got the same thing. He's never had a pair of gloves on in his life.
Yeah, no.
Now, do fighters suffer so many knockouts that, they have slurred speech, blurred vision, they go deaf? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. They have brain hemorrhages? Absolutely. But they have on those 12-ounce gloves, or 10s, depending on your weight class. But those guys in the UFC,
it's a whole different animal.
And nobody says anything at all
Yeah.
about brain damage coming out of that.
Yeah, I know.
Out of that sport.
We love it though. As a society, we love it. We crave it, Humans love to see. Think about if you're walking down the street, someone could be juggling knives, and you'll look and you'll probably just keep walking. Someone else could be dealing drugs. You'll look and then you'll keep walking. But if two guys start fist fighting on the sidewalk, you're going to stop and you're going to watch the whole fight. No matter what happens, you're going to stand there. And I guess it's just human nature.
Know what the emperors in Rome said? Hey, when they had unrest, bring everybody in the Colosseum and put some gladiators in there.
Let them fight. People love it.
Let the gladiators, shed blood. Let the people watch it, and they're going to go home happy.
Yeah.
And they did. And that's just human nature. The the gorier it is, the more the human, the more human nature says, that's nice.
Yeah.
I want to do it. People are letting their kids, mixed martial arts or whatever, that UFC thing. I don't know the proper names for it. But they're letting their kids get into that at young ages. And they're watching them getting kicked up. So, yeah, he's going to make him tough. He's going to put him in a boxing ring. And as soon as they get hit, oh my God, my baby just got knocked down.
I know. Yeah. I'm not, I've tried like kickboxing. I am not one who wants to get kicked in the legs. No, thank you. That is not for me. That is not for me. I have a lot of respect for people who do that because I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
I'm not getting kicked in the legs.
I tell people this all the time. I had a guy ask me a few years back, hey, what would you do if you met that UFC fighter in a dark alley? Would you fight him? I said, no, I'd shoot him.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I would stand almost no chance.
There's no chance.
I stand no chance against that. Yeah.
There's absolutely no chance. James Toney, one heck of a fighter. I mean, James, they didn't call him lights out, because he didn't have electricity. James was a bad man, but you see what happened to him? He did that one UFC fight and got choked out because, boxers don't,
It's a completely different sport.
Absolutely.
It's not even, you can't, it's like comparing, football to basketball. Like, yeah, they both use a ball, but it is a completely different sport.
Absolutely.
And it's almost not fair to either sport to compare the two, because what boxers do, it may look kind of similar, but it's nothing what UFC guys are doing. And what UFC guys are doing, it may look similar to just boxing, but it's so very different. And I don't like the comparisons between the two.
No,
it's not fair to either one. But I mean, people have to, the talking heads have to have things to argue about. So,
well, when Vince Petway knocked out Simon Brown, when Simon Brown was trying to come back, he knocked him out, and Simon was laying on his back, and he was still throwing punches, And, everybody was saying, whoa, look at that. He's, But I was watching one of those clips the other day from the UFC. This guy got kicked upside the head. And, I mean, he just went, boom, right to the floor. And, the doctors went over and, started reviving him, trying to get him to talk back and whatever. And, and he had this odd-looking grin on his face, and he was still throwing punches.
No one thinks.
No one thought.
Yeah.
No one thought twice about
It really is. I think football players kind of fall into the same thing where we view the game of football similar to combat sports, where we just want to see the biggest, the strongest, and the fastest ram into each other for 60 minutes. And I mean, I think in general, we're concerned if they get hurt. But let's be honest, football players get hurt all the time, and we're like, next guy up.
There it is.
Keep the game going. Next guy up.
Yeah, no regard. I mean, they have a regard for the guy.
They do, yeah. But from a fan standpoint, get the game. Let's go. Get the game going.
Yeah. Did you by chance happen? Excuse me for cutting you off, but did you see the fight between Ronnie Lyle and George Foreman? That was one of the best.
I can't remember.
That was one of the best heavyweight fights ever. It was brutal because those two guys stood toe to toe. And I mean, George get dropped, he'd get up, he'd drop Ronnie Lyle. Lyle get up, he'd drop George. I mean, it just went back and forth like the whole fight. People said that was a brutal fight, one of the most brutal fights they'd ever seen. But they don't say that about UFC fighting. And I mean, those guys get their butts handed to them.
Yeah, when it goes bad, it goes real bad.
And nobody ever says, boy, that was a brutal fight.
Yeah.
They just say, "Oh, what a fight!"
What a fight.
The crowd loved it.
We love the blood. We love the violence. That's
Yeah.
just our society. I think we love the violence. We're always going to be attracted to violent sports.
Yeah.
We always will be. Whether it's good, I don't know, whether it's good for our society or not. The money's too good, so it's never, they're not. These sports aren't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, no, none of them are.
No.
And that's why with boxing, I try to make boxing as safe for a fighter, even in the amateurs, as I possibly can.
Yeah. Do you think it's safe amateur-wise to have, and I know the rounds, shorter time frame, you start out, rounds are a minute and a half, and you're only doing 3 rounds. Then you graduate to 2-minute rounds and then to 3-minute rounds. Mm-hmm. But, like we were talking about earlier, there's amateurs that'll have 300 plus fights. Do you think that that's any more safe or less safe than if someone did way less fights but just went to the pro ranks immediately to try to get that career started?
That's a toss-up because you can have somebody with 300 fights. You can have somebody with only 20 fights.
Mm-hmm.
And that kid with 20 fights can beat the kid with 300 fights. You can have that. And because he had 300 fights, that's not an actual catapult into the pros. The pros is something that, they really have to consider.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an automatic catapult. If a kid, Dedrick, for instance, 9-time national champ, represented the United States in Germany at the USA tournament, fought in the Olympics, this and that and the other. Well, he's done all he could do in the amateurs, and so his next step is to move onward.
Mm-hmm.
But it had nothing to do with all of his fights. He has completed all of his goals down here.
It's just time to graduate.
It's just time to graduate.
Time to graduate. Do you think, from a wear and tear standpoint, he maybe has more wear and tear going into the pros, and that could either hurt him at some point?
No.
Because these guys take care of themselves pretty well.
Yeah, if you have a guy that's got, 300 amateur fights, and he's lost 200 of them, and, he was knocked out 100 of those times, yeah, then you have reservations.
Okay.
But
not a lot of knockouts in the amateurs, it seems like.
Not a lot.
Yeah, not a lot.
Now they do occur.
Yes, yeah.
They do occur.
They do. They definitely happen, but it seems like the knockout rate is much lower.
Much lower.
Yeah, yeah. Bigger gloves, the headgear. It's
Right.
just there's a lot of, I guess, safety measures put in place to prevent the knockouts. But that doesn't mean it doesn't still hurt. I've been punched in the head with headgear and 16-ounce gloves. It still hurts.
Yeah, but have you had on 12-ounce gloves yet?
Nope.
And been hit?
Nope.
Yeah, it's the difference of day and night.
I'll probably pass on that one. I think that's going to be what keeps me out of the pro rank, Coach.
Well, no, even the amateurs are like that.
Oh, okay.
The lighter weight guys wear 10-ounce gloves, and the heavier weights like the 140. Now they're 142s or 143s, but anyway, they wear 12-ounce gloves from that weight to heavyweight.
Okay.
They wear 12-ounce gloves, and the rest of them wear 10-ounce gloves. So if it was you, you'd be wearing 12-ounce gloves.
Yeah, I'll stick to the 16s.
Okay, then you're gonna spar a lot.
I'll just spar a lot. I'm happy just sparring. I'm definitely happy just sparring. I do want to do a fight at some point. Like I was telling you, I want that experience. I want to feel what those nerves are. I want to feel what it's like to kind of train and prepare for that, just to have that experience. If I do more than one, who knows?
That's just the thing. It's gonna come when you get up here straight.
Yeah.
You'll know when it's time. You'll know when it's time when you say, "Yep, I'm gonna do it." You have absolutely no reservations whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
You'll just wake up one morning and say, "I know there's a fight coming up in a month. I'm gonna fight." You'll know when it's
I'll know. Yeah, I'm not quite there yet. I'm very content at this point, with what I'm doing. I told Tank a few weeks ago, not the same Tank we were talking about earlier. I told him, we finished practice, and I said, hey, I yelled at him. I go, hey, I need to see where I'm at. I need you to step it up. I go, you got a green light. And as soon as I said that, I was like, man, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But the next few, I guess, sparring sessions that, him and I were in the ring for, he definitely turned it up. He turned it up immediately, and then the following day, he turned it up even more. Right. And, he definitely was beating me, and he was hitting me way harder than he ever had and way more often than he ever had. But I was at least able to defend myself and to counter. And, I think just by accident, it forced my defense to be a little better. I wasn't even concerned with my offense because I couldn't, I had no offense at that point because he's just all over me. But it really forced I think it really showed a lot of holes in my defense. Having someone who was really pressuring me and really putting it to me. And, I was able to kind of fight my way out of some situations, and, I was able to counter a little bit here and there. But I really enjoyed being pushed like that and being challenged like that. And it was, an interesting feeling. Because I hadn't really been that. I had been definitely, I had gotten beat up in the ring before, right. But I think that was because of just a lack of skills.
That's the way I met you.
You getting beat up, exactly. Exactly. So it was nice to actually have some skills and have a bit of a foundation that I could lean back on at that point, and just be able to protect myself. And even if I think one of the last rounds we did, I don't even know if I threw 5 punches the whole time, but I wasn't getting hurt, with everything he was throwing at me. I was still able to get stuff to deflect, I wasn't getting hit clean all the time. And so it was a good test. And he's not taking it easy on me like he used to. Well. So, but that's what I want.
Be careful what you ask.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes I open my big mouth and then I got to deal with it. Oh man. Hey, we're a little over an hour. You get to enjoy my exit music. This music that I play at the end of all my episodes, this has been a work in progress now. This is, I think, my 47th episode, 48th. I can't get this right.
Is that right?
I can't find a song so I just play this because it makes me think of the beach, and then I just slowly.
That sounds a little tropical.
It's very tropical. Even the picture, it's just this dude with his feet kicked up at the beach. Yeah. So I don't know. It makes me feel a little relaxed. Hey, like I said at the beginning, I don't want this to be a one-time thing. I would definitely love to have you back again. And I know you are going to be starting your own podcast. Right. So I'm helping you kind of get that up off the ground and running. Absolutely. And yeah, when you get that going, I would love to be a guest on your show, and we can just shoot the shit, I guess, as they say. So we'll stay tuned for that. And once you get your show up, then I'll help you get that pushed out and give you as much.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Good deal.
Actually, this was fun, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I enjoyed having you here. And again, this has been the Jake Brown Podcast. You can find all my episodes on Apple, on Spotify, on Amazon Music. Screw YouTube. I don't like them. They keep censoring me, so I'm out. I'm done with YouTube. I'm not doing this to make money, so I'm just doing this to have fun. All right, I hope everyone has a great day, and I will, I guess, talk to you all later. That's it, just like that.
Wow.